Parliament's Chair of Chairs, Cedric Froelich, as well as Deputy President David Mabuza, to reprimand the ministers and the Speaker. Well, COVID-19 has highlighted South Africa's inequalities like nothing before. The government has been unable to stem the tide of unemployment and poverty over the last 2 years. Economics Professor Yanni Rousseau says South Africans must not raise their hopes high, at least not as far as the current governance environment in the country is concerned, and the search for solutions. He's joining us now to talk more about what is likely to happen throughout 2022. Professor Rousseau, a very good evening to you. Welcome to the program. So, not very optimistic, I must say, for 2022. Why do you think that we're still likely to see such a gloomy handling of the situation going forward?
Good evening, Temukile, and good evening to your viewers. In short, Temukile, the country is now in an election mode. The first shots had already been fired in the succession or not succession battle for the ANC presidency in December of this year. We see the fight between Minister Sisulu and President Ramaphosa, and this is going to be setting the scene for 2022. And then from 2023 until the general election in 2024, the country will be in full election mode. So South Africa and South Africans will have to figure out how to move on without the support of the government. This government can no longer support the people of South Africa. This government is at war with itself.
But how then does a country, a population, move on without a government that is, as you are stating, otherwise preoccupied?
Well, you have to figure out how you can do business without the support of the government, how you can figure out ways to support yourself without the government's assistance. And then, of course, we have low expectations of the government, but where we can, we have to put pressure on the government to do obvious things that will move the economy forward and that will help us to get a higher economic growth rate so that we can find jobs for the millions of jobless people in South Africa. So I have two solutions for that. On the one hand, we must eradicate the country. We must get rid of state capture and corruption. My solution for that one is that all contracts of this government at central government level, provincial government level, and municipal level must be published for public scrutiny. After all, the government is contracting with taxpayers' money. Why can't we see what they are doing with our money? And then secondly, we must do what we can to stimulate domestic economic manufacturing, domestic economic demand. My solution for that one is that the government should only purchase vehicles manufactured in South Africa for cabinet ministers, central government, provincial government, and municipal governments. There's no reason why cabinet ministers, for instance, can't be transported proudly South Africa. That will be an immediate boost to our economy, an immediate boost to domestic manufacturing, with a positive spin-off for job creation.
A lot of that, Prof, sounds to me as though it would ultimately require the involvement of government or government officials at some level, which then contradicts, to my mind, the earlier point about the country moving forward without the politicians.
Yeah, hence I'm making the point that where we can and where we have the opportunity, we must put pressure for this. But for the rest, we must figure out how to move on without the support of the government.
And on turning around the country's economy, it's been a theme now for the better part of 10 plus years or so. Can it all be achieved within a year? Do you think things are finally so bad that even the politicians realize that we simply have to get moving?
Yes, we can achieve a lot in a year if we have decisive leadership from President Ramaphosa. But unfortunately, during his term to date, we've seen that he's not a very strong leader, that he's not taking decisions that we need taken in South Africa, and hence we are running the risk that we might have another 5 wasted years under Mr. Ramaphosa, similar to the 10 wasted years we had under former President Zuma. So what we have to have now is clear leadership from President Ramaphosa, and that's been lacking during all the years of his presidency up to now.
I want to go back to the point you were raising about corruption, a big waste of money in this country because money that could help you and I and many other ordinary South Africans is taken by the rich in both the public and private sectors. What is the role of the private sector going forward, A, in fighting corruption and making sure that we save the country's economy from any further damage?
Well, as far as possible, the private sector should invest in our economy. However, unfortunately, to establish new businesses in South Africa and to run businesses in South Africa, you have to have some interaction with the government. Now, we have a government at the moment that cannot even issue driver's licenses. So if your government can't issue driver's licenses, how on earth do you expect your government to engage new businesses to help them to get established and to go forward with their business activities? But it's only through increased private sector involvement in this economy that we will create the necessary jobs, that we will get the higher economic growth rate, and that we will move the economy forward. So we are desperately in need of a new government in South Africa. We just cannot continue as we just cannot stay here. It's an untenable situation.
One of the news developments that we've been tracking today has been the public hearings today in Gauteng into the application by Eskom to have tariffs increased by over 20% for 2022-2023. How much deeper would that sink households into an economic crisis? And what would that mean then for the goal of attracting investment in the short term?
Well, we have to have a viable Eskom. Eskom must be financially viable, given its pivotal role in the South African economy. However, Eskom has lost the confidence of the public because of its conduct over the past decade. So I would also like to see Eskom publishing all its contracts for public scrutiny, and only then we will have a clear understanding of whether Eskom really needs a 20% tariff increase or not. But if Eskom is prepared to allow more transparency, we will understand what's going on, and we will understand what is really needed in terms of a tariff increase to make Eskom financially viable. At the same time, I should hasten to add that the government should just close all other non-viable financial state enterprises that are not critical to our existence, like South African Airways should simply be closed, the NEL should simply be closed, Telexcore should simply be sold to the private sector. There's no reason for the government to own a diamond mine of all sorts of things. And by the way, a diamond mine that's losing money. So we need a rethink of state-owned enterprises to focus on those that are mission critical and to get rid of those making losses that are not mission critical. But again, that means an engagement with a non-functional government.
I may have missed this, Prof, but should we privatize Eskom? Because that's been very controversial.
Yeah, I'm personally not in favor of the privatization of Eskom for the simple reason that it's a monopoly. I am in favor of more transparency at Eskom, and I'm in favor of allowing more private electricity generation to reduce reliance on Eskom. Investment in South Africa will remain problematic for as long as there are questions about Eskom's ability to supply electricity on a sustainable basis. So the current problems at Eskom make it unattractive to invest in South Africa, hence my argument that we should allow more private sector generation.
Professor Yanni Rousseau, Professor of Economics, speaking to us tonight. Thank you for your time, sir, and being on News at Prime. Well, we've got much more news for you coming up in a moment. Stay with News at Prime. In fact, we're going to talk about this now because the Health Minister has welcomed that 11.4 billion rand loan from the World Bank. Dr. Joe Pahla says it's a low-interest loan and will help South Africa in its continued fight against COVID-19, as well as efforts to revive the economy, which we've just been discussing with Professor Rousseau. Well,